1890, Sophie, Leah, Monica, and Rachel boarded a train for what should have been a carefree summer trip. They were last seen laughing in their seats, sandwiches half eaten, Walkman still playing. By the next stop, the girls had vanished, jackets and journals left behind, but not a trace of them anywhere on the train. For 20 years, families begged for answers, haunted by silence and rumor. Then, when the FBI pried open a forgotten service chamber buried beneath the very tracks that train once traveled, the stench alone told investigators a story no one was prepared to hear. What they uncovered inside left an entire nation stunned and revealed a truth far darker than anyone had imagined. Want to help us decide the next story? Vote in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss it. Summer, 1990. The station platform hummed with life, diesel fumes hanging in the warm air, the clang of metal wheels echoing against brick walls, chatter weaving into the soundscape like static. Parents stood in clusters, waving programs, sipping vending machine coffee, watching the big clock tick closer to departure. 4 girls moved through the crowd together, a little island of excitement. Sophie, 17, tall and calm, her denim jacket slung casually over one shoulder. Leah, 15, fiddling with her cassette Walkman, fast-forwarding until her favorite song clicked into place. Monica, bold with a laugh that carried over the station noise, flipping her curly hair back like she was on stage. And Rachel, 14, shy and bright-eyed, gripping her backpack straps so tight her knuckles whitened. This wasn't an ordinary train ride. It was their first unsupervised trip. Just a weekend away, but it felt like a leap into adulthood. They'd saved for months, buying tickets with babysitting money and summer jobs. The platform buzzed with nerves. Mothers gave last-minute reminders. Fathers double-checked tickets as if the paper itself could vanish. One bystander leaned close to another, murmuring with a half-smirk, "What's up with sending 4 kids off alone? Brave or crazy?" The other chuckled, low enough to avoid stares. "Wow, guess we'll see." The conductor's whistle cut the air. Doors hissed open, and the girls climbed aboard, waving one last time before the carriage swallowed them. From the platform, their families' faces blurred behind the smudged glass, shrinking as the train jolted forward. Inside, the carriage smelled faintly of vinyl, coffee, and cigarette smoke from an older man 2 rows down. The girls took seats together near the back. Sophie scribbled a note in her travel journal. Leah tugged headphones snug over her ears. Monica teased Rachel for how tightly she clutched her lunch bag. They traded sandwiches and gossip, their voices carrying like a bubble of joy through the monotonous hum of the train. Other passengers noticed them. A woman in pearls whispered to her husband, "So young to be on their own." He shrugged without looking up from his newspaper. A pair of boys a few rows back nudged each other, eyeing the group with smirks. The girls laughed louder, unbothered, or maybe pretending to be. As the scenery blurred into fields and forests, the rhythm of wheels against rails settled into a heartbeat. The girls leaned back, trading stories, snapping pictures with a disposable camera. Every detail was ordinary, safe. No one on that train, least of all the 4 girls, knew that this would be the last time anyone saw them alive. The train rolled on, steel wheels hammering the tracks with a steady rhythm. Sunlight streaked through dusty windows, striping the seats where Sophie, Leah, Monica, and Rachel laughed only an hour before. Some passengers later recalled seeing them in the dining car, Monica leaning over the counter for a soda, Sophie checking her watch, Leah and Rachel trailing behind. Others swore the girls were back in their seats, heads bent together, whispering secrets. The details blurred, shifting like smoke. What is certain, by the time the train slowed into the next station, their places were empty. Jackets still hung over the armrests. Sophie's travel journal lay open on the seat, ink smudged by the sway of the carriage. Leah's Walkman rested beside half a sandwich, the cassette still spinning. Rachel's backpack was wedged neatly above, untouched. But the girls were gone. The conductor noticed first. He moved down the aisle, hole-punching tickets, then froze when he reached the 4 vacant seats. He checked the racks, the corridor, the bathroom stalls. Nothing. When the train stopped, he alerted the station master. 4 passengers had vanished mid-journey. On the platform, waiting parents scanned the crowd, searching faces spilling from the train. Their daughters didn't appear. Shouts cut across the noise. "Sophie! Rachel!" But no answer came. A mother grabbed an officer's sleeve, eyes wide. They were on that train. They never got off. Passengers were questioned immediately. Some insisted they'd seen the girls get off at a rural stop. Others claimed they were still laughing near the dining car when the train pulled away. No story matched, no timeline held. By nightfall, 4 lives had slipped from a crowded train without a sound, leaving only belongings behind. The alarm went out within hours. Sirens wailed along the tracks, radios barked orders, and uniforms filled the station where the girls were last seen. Police cordoned off the platform, guiding stunned passengers into neat rows to be questioned again, this time under harsher light. The train was searched inch by inch. Officers pried open compartments, crawled under seats, even tapped along the walls as if expecting hollow spaces to answer back. Bathrooms were checked twice, luggage racks emptied. Nothing. Only the belongings of Sophie, Leah, Monica, and Rachel remained, mute reminders of their absence. Outside, the countryside turned into a grid of flashlights and boot prints. Volunteers walked shoulder to shoulder through fields of high grass. Search dogs barked furiously at first, noses pressed to the gravel near the rails, before whining in confusion as the scent trails evaporated in the night air. A helicopter circled above, its spotlight sweeping over barns, bridges, and the backs of lonely farmhouses. Every lead dissolved into contradiction. One man claimed he saw the girls step off at a rural siding, escorted by, quote, 2 older men in dark jackets. Another insisted he spotted them through a carriage window long after that, still laughing, still alive. A dining car attendant swore Monica had bought a soda, but no one could confirm if she returned to her seat. The puzzle pieces refused to lock. Back at the station, families gathered in shock. Rachel's mother sat stiff on a bench, both hands clutching her daughter's denim backpack that had been returned by officers. Leah's father confronted detectives, voice cracking. You don't just vanish from a moving train. Somebody knows something. On the edges of the crowd, whispers coiled like smoke. Girls shouldn't travel alone, not these days. A woman stirred her coffee and muttered, "What did the parents expect?" The words stung, cruel not by volume but by timing, twisting blame into the wound. By dawn, the press had arrived. Cameras captured parents pacing, detectives scanning maps, and tired officers shaking their heads. Every headline wrote itself. 4 girls missing from train, no trace found. But despite the manpower, despite the flood of theories, nothing solid emerged. No footprints leading away, no witnesses that agreed, no signs of a struggle. The girls had boarded a crowded train in daylight, surrounded by strangers, and by the next station, it was as if they had been erased. Within 48 hours, the story wasn't just local, it was everywhere. Newspapers plastered the girls' school portraits across front pages. Sophie with her quiet half-smile, Leah with headphones looped around her neck, Monica flashing a grin that seemed to challenge the camera, Rachel's shy eyes peeking from beneath her fringe. 4 ordinary faces, now symbols of a mystery too big to ignore. Television anchors spoke in hushed tones, dragging out pauses for effect. 4 teenage girls boarded a train, and by the next stop, they were gone. Behind the anchor's voice, images rolled. The train sitting idle, empty seats with jackets draped over them, a Walkman still spinning a cassette that would never be finished. The country obsessed. Talk radio lit up with callers swearing they knew someone who knew something. Conspiracy threads sprouted everywhere. Abduction, trafficking rings, runaway pact, even wild theories about hidden compartments in trains. Each new rumor fed the fire. The families were thrust in front of cameras, begging for answers. Sophie's mother gripped the podium with white knuckles, her voice thin but sharp. Please, please bring them back. They are only children. Rachel's father stood beside her, silent, his lips moving like he was praying. At the local diner, gossip bled into casual talk. A man stirred his coffee, muttering, "Kids that age shouldn't be alone on trains." Another shook his head, softer, almost defensive. "Yeah, but wow, that doesn't mean they just vanish." Parents sitting at the back heard every word, their faces tightening as if each comment added a new bruise. The case had become national spectacle, but all the noise, the headlines, the debates, none of it brought the girls closer to home. By the end of that first year, the headlines thinned. New scandals, new tragedies filled the news cycle, and the 4 girls slipped from the front pages into the shadowed corners of memory. The posters taped to telephone poles curled with rain, faces sun-bleached until Sophie, Leah, Monica, and Rachel looked like faint sketches instead of daughters. But for their families, the silence was louder than any news broadcast. Birthdays came like stones dropping into water. Empty chairs were still set at kitchen tables. Rachel's mother kept her daughter's room untouched, the bedspread smoothed flat each morning. Sophie's father mowed the lawn every Saturday as though the rhythm might steady him, but his eyes always drifted to the driveway, waiting for a car that never returned. Detectives shuffled the case file endlessly. Tips arrived, each one fizzling into nothing. A jacket found near the tracks belonged to a drifter. A supposed sighting of Monica in another state collapsed when the witness confused her for someone else. Even psychic hotlines called in, claiming visions of tunnels or rivers. Every false lead pulled the families up, only to drop them harder. The community changed, too. At church gatherings, whispers filled the back pews. Maybe the girls ran away. Another voice would answer, "Run away with no shoes? No money? No calls? No chance." At the diner, the gossip softened but never died. A waitress wiping counters sighed. "They're gone, honey." Best people stopped clinging. Parents overheard, jaws tightening, but they stayed quiet, too tired to fight strangers' opinions. Teenagers turned the story into ghost legend. They dared each other to ride the late train alone, whispering that if the lights flickered, you'd hear 4 girls laughing just before they vanished. To the kids, it was thrill-seeking. To the families, it was unbearable. A decade slipped by. Then another. The official word from law enforcement hardened. No new leads. No viable suspects. Case remains open. But everyone knew what that meant. Cold. For 20 years, the families were forced to live with the same question, unanswered. Not if their daughters were gone. They already knew that. But how? The silence had become its own prison. 2 decades after that summer day in 1990, the case was little more than a dusty file. Families had aged into grief, detectives had retired, and the world had moved on. But then, one small thread tugged the silence loose. It began with a man named Arthur Klein, a retired railway technician. Bent with age, cap pulled low, he walked into an FBI field office in 2010 with a story that had gnawed at him for 20 years. He said that on the very night Sophie, Leah, Monica, and Rachel vanished, he'd been stationed along a rural stretch of track. He remembered the storm, how the rain slicked the rails until they gleamed like mirrors. And he remembered something else, the train slowing down where no stop should have been. Arthur swore he'd seen men moving near an old service tunnel, dragging what looked like sacks or luggage off the train. At the time, he convinced himself it wasn't his business. He filed it away, buried under routine maintenance logs. But guilt grew heavier with each year. At first, the FBI hesitated. Memories warp, details erode. But Arthur described the service tunnel in exact detail, a forgotten chamber sealed since the early 90s. Blueprints confirmed it existed. The Bureau reopened the case. Old files were pulled, grainy photographs pinned again to corkboards. Agents retraced the train's route, reviewing records long shelved. Families, worn by years of silence, were called once more. For the first time in decades, hope flickered, fragile, but alive. Excavation crews were sent to the site Arthur described. The tunnel entrance was overgrown, its steel door rusted, the lock fused solid. As agents gathered, the countryside held its breath. Everyone knew whatever lay behind that door could finally answer the question that had haunted the country for 20 years. The FBI team worked the rusted lock with cutting tools, sparks spitting into the damp air. Locals gathered at a distance, whispering to each other, arms folded tight against their chests. A woman muttered, "What's up with that place? No one's opened it in years." Her neighbor shook his head, eyes fixed on the steel door. Wow, 20 years, and it was right here. When the hinges finally gave, the door groaned like a dying animal. A wave of stench rolled out, thick, rotten, clinging to clothes and hair. Agents gagged behind their masks. Flashlights cut into the dark, beams jittering across concrete walls dripping with mildew. Inside lay an abandoned maintenance chamber. Old crates slumped in the corners. Tools rusted into shapes barely recognizable. But it wasn't the tools that made hearts stop. Scattered across the dirt floor were personal artifacts. A cracked cassette tape, a torn denim sleeve, the strap of a pink backpack. Items the families recognized instantly. And in the far corner, bones. 4 sets, tangled together under scraps of clothing long since eaten by time. A small bracelet still clung to one wrist bone. A locket lay beside another skeleton, its hinge corroded but still holding a faded photo. Hair clumped in the dust, brittle strands catching in the flashlight beams. Agents moved slowly, marking evidence with trembling hands. Sophie's travel journal was pulled from beneath a collapsed crate, its pages swollen with mildew, ink blurred but still legible in parts. Monica's denim jacket sleeve, Leah's Walkman, corroded but intact. Rachel's backpack buckle, rusted but unmistakable. The chamber was sealed quickly, treated as a crime scene. Evidence bags filled, cameras flashed, but silence pressed heavier than any noise. Even the agents, hardened by years of grim discoveries, spoke in low voices. One muttered under his breath, "They were here the whole time." News broke within hours. Crowds lit candles at the station, leaving flowers along the tracks. Parents clutched photographs against their chests, tears carving lines down faces aged by decades of waiting. The country reeled. How could 4 girls vanish in plain sight and remain hidden under steel and dirt for 20 years? The answer lay not in the discovery itself, but in the clues those remnants would reveal. The chamber's contents were catalogued and studied piece by piece. Forensic specialists pieced together the girls' final hours from what little time had spared. Sophie's journal, though warped with mildew, held a handful of legible lines. "We're locked in. The door won't open. Someone is outside." Another page trailed into frantic scratches, the ink smeared as if written in the dark. The bones told the rest. Scratch marks lined the inside of the steel door, grooves carved deep into rust with fingernails and scraps of metal. Forensics confirmed starvation and dehydration as the likely cause of death. The FBI concluded the girls hadn't vanished by chance. They'd been forced into that chamber, trapped in silence until the world above moved on. The country recoiled. News anchors delivered the findings with grim faces, pausing often, as if words themselves were too heavy. Candlelight vigils stretched from Montana to New York, strangers holding signs with the girls' names. At the train station, crowds stood in absolute silence as the rails hummed with passing trains, a reminder of the lives cut short beneath them. Families faced microphones once more, decades older now. Leah's father spoke with a trembling voice. "For 20 years, we begged for answers. Now we know. But knowing doesn't heal." Sophie's mother clutched her daughter's recovered journal, pressing it to her chest as if she could still feel her child's heartbeat in the pages. The FBI vowed reforms, pledging tighter security and regular inspections of every abandoned chamber along the rail lines. But promises were cold comfort. The truth had come too late. For 20 years, the truth of what happened to Sophie, Leah, Monica, and Rachel was sealed away in silence until the FBI uncovered a secret darker than anyone imagined. If stories like this keep you hooked, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop a like, because the next mystery we uncover might leave you even more speechless.